The Garden of Midnight Roses. In a quiet village tucked between rolling hills and winding rivers, there lived a young woman named Alara. She was known for her grace, her laughter that sounded like wind chimes, and the secret garden she tended behind her grandmother's old stone house. The villagers often said that magic lingered in her roses. They bloomed only at midnight and shimmered like stardust in the moonlight. Alara had never known her parents. Raised by her grandmother, she spent her days painting, reading poetry, and cultivating her midnight roses, believing one day someone would understand their silent language. She often wondered what it would feel like to be loved deeply, quietly, without reason, just like how her roses bloomed for the moon. One summer evening, as a soft storm rolled in and the scent of wet earth filled the air, a stranger arrived in the village. His name was Tristan, a war medic, carrying scars not only on his skin but deep within his soul. He had come in search of peace, far away from the cries of battlefields and the shadows of the past. Tristan rented a room in the local inn and spent his days walking the hills in silence. He avoided crowds and seldom spoke, but something about the village soothed him, especially the faint scent of roses that danced on the midnight wind. One night, unable to sleep, he followed the fragrance and found himself outside Alara's garden gate. He watched, hidden by the ivy-covered wall, as Alara tended her roses in the moonlight. She moved as though she were part of the earth itself, calm, wild, and endlessly kind. Days passed, and Tristan returned night after night, never speaking, just watching from afar. Until one evening, the gate creaked open behind Alara. She turned, startled, but when her eyes met his, neither spoke. "You came," she finally whispered. "I didn't mean to," he said, voice rough from disuse. "But your garden, it's the only place I've found, still." Alara smiled. "Then stay. Stillness can be shared." And so began their quiet companionship. Tristan helped her in the garden. He read the book she loved. In return, Alara listened when he spoke of things that haunted him, memories of soldiers he couldn't save, the loneliness of surviving. She never offered hollow words. She simply listened, offering presence as her gift. As the weeks passed, their bond grew like vines between stone, quiet but unbreakable. Alara painted him in the golden light of morning, in the soft shadows of twilight. Tristan, in turn, began writing again, letters, poems, pieces of his broken heart stitched together with ink. One night, beneath the bloom of 1,000 silver-petaled roses, Tristan kissed her for the first time. It was not urgent, not fiery. It was slow, reverent, like a prayer whispered after years of silence. "I never thought I'd feel this again," he murmured against her lips. "You didn't have to think," she said. "Just feel." They built a life together, not of grand adventures, but of quiet mornings, shared teacups, muddy boots in the garden, and laughter echoing through rain-drenched windows. Tristan's scars remained, but they no longer defined him. They were part of the tapestry that Alara loved, threads of strength, pain, and survival. Years later, when the village children spoke of the Garden of Midnight Roses, they would also speak of the two souls who lived there. One who had known too much sorrow, and one who taught him how to bloom again. And every night, just as the clock struck 12, the roses glowed silver under the moonlight, proof that even the most broken hearts can find light again, in the most unexpected places. Echoes of the heart. In a sleepy coastal town called Rose Hollow, time seemed to move slower than anywhere else. The sea whispered its lullabies to the shore, and every morning, the sunlight painted golden trails across the waves. It was in this tranquil corner of the world that Alara Thompson had grown up, her heart stitched to the rhythm of the tide and the scent of salt in the wind. Alara was a painter. Her days were spent blending sky blues and ocean greens on canvas, capturing the soul of Rose Hollow through her art. Though content, her life followed a quiet routine, until the day Adrian Whitlock arrived. Adrian was a travel writer, a man who had wandered from the streets of Paris to the deserts of Morocco, collecting stories and leaving behind bits of his heart in every place. But when his car broke down near Rose Hollow on a rainy evening, fate nudged him toward Alara's little seaside gallery, where he sought shelter from the storm. Their first meeting was anything but cinematic. He was drenched, grumpy, and more concerned about his soaked notebook than conversation. Alara handed him a towel and offered him tea without asking questions. And that silent kindness stayed with him. Over the next days, waiting for car parts and better weather, Adrian explored Rose Hollow. And wherever he went, Alara seemed to appear, at the farmer's market choosing peaches, sitting by the dock sketching boats, or reading quietly beneath the lighthouse. They began to talk. Slowly. Carefully. As if afraid to break the calmness that surrounded them. Alara found Adrian's stories fascinating. He spoke of distant lands with a wistfulness that made her heart ache. Adrian, in turn, found peace in her presence. She didn't ask him to perform or entertain, she just listened, like the sea listens to every wave. One evening, they walked along the cliffs where the sky met the ocean in a burst of orange and lavender. Adrian paused, then said, "You make me feel like I've finally arrived somewhere." Alara looked at him, eyes reflecting the fading light. "And you make me wonder what's beyond the edges of my canvas." Their kiss was quiet, like everything else in Rose Hollow, unhurried, real. Weeks passed. Adrian stayed longer than planned. He wrote in the mornings and helped Alara in the gallery in the afternoons. Together, they repainted the back porch, planted herbs, and danced barefoot in the kitchen to old jazz records. For the first time in years, Adrian stopped searching for a story, because he realized he was living one. But autumn crept in with golden leaves and goodbyes. Adrian's publisher called. There was a book tour. Deadlines. Expectations. Alara smiled as she helped him pack, even as her heart frayed at the edges. "I'll come back," Adrian promised. She nodded. "And I'll be here. Waiting." Letters became their lifeline. Every week, one would arrive, filled with words, sketches, pressed flowers, poems, memories. And then, one spring morning, Alara opened a letter that wasn't a letter at all. It was a plane ticket, and a simple note: "I've told all the stories I needed to. Now I want to write ours." Alara stood at the edge of the dock, the sea wind in her hair, when Adrian returned. He didn't say anything at first. Just held her, as the waves whispered the same lullaby they'd always known. And in the little town of Rose Hollow, where time moved slower and hearts beat quietly, their love echoed like the tide, constant, deep, and endless.